All right, so good morning. Warm welcome to all the participants online. Welcome to this month's NORA seminar. My name is Suzanne van Gils. I'm an associate professor at BI, Norwegian Business School, and I'm here today with an exciting panel to talk about post-pandemic communication opportunities. For you, those of you that are joining on a regular basis, you might know already that NORA is like the Nordic Alliance for Communication Management, and we're actually based in multiple Scandinavian countries. So as you can see today, again, we have a panel based in Denmark, Sweden, and Norway for you to discuss post-pandemic communication opportunities. And this is this year's, I think, 7th webinar on different communication topics. So the short introduction of the panel. First of all, we're very happy to have Professor Winnie Johansen here. She's a professor of corporate communication in Aarhus University, and she will be talking to us about the pandemic and post-pandemic, post-crisis communication opportunities for businesses. Then we have Ulrike Haugen, the Executive Vice President and Chief Communications Officer at DNV in Norway. Very happy to have you here today. We're also joined by Victoria Häggblom, if I pronounce that correctly, the communications management at Volvo Group in Sweden, and then Katrin Johansson, professor in Mid-Sweden University in organizational communication. So we hope to bring you like a diverse perspective on post-pandemic communication opportunities. And to do so, we will start with Winnie. You can start sharing your slides, and we're looking forward to your presentation. And for anybody joining the panel or joining as an attendee today, you can post comments in the Q&A that we will take up at the end. So happy to hear from you as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, it is still morning, I think. Well, as you heard, my name is Winnie Johansen, and I'm a professor at Aarhus University. But at the same time, I am a professor too at BI in Oslo. I'm going to start this exciting webinar, and I'm going to put on a research perspective and start with what can we learn? So post-pandemic learnings within management as well as within communication. So can we actually learn from crisis? Are there any opportunities out there? That would be my question. So if you look into the literature, we always talk about the paradox of learning from crisis. In fact, crises are paradoxical in nature. On the one hand, they have revealing properties and uncover hidden factors that the organization wouldn't have been aware of if the crisis had not occurred. On the other hand, because of the way crises manifest, crises take on varied forms and characteristics that in fact inhibit the learning process. So although you could say that crises are unique opportunities to learn, organizations are reluctant to learn from crises. And why is that? A French scholar, Christophe Roudifort, has studied this for years, and he's talking about the perverse power of normalization. That when we are in a crisis, we want to engage in normalization practices. We want to go back to business as usual. We want to maintain status quo because that's the best thing to create a stable environment around us. So we try to normalize the situation by, for instance, building a very simplified version of the crisis, reducing the emotional charge of the crisis, because a crisis situation is a situation where there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of ambiguity and uncertainty, because as a manager, you do not know exactly how to deal with events that are uncommon. It makes you uncomfortable. And in order to deal with that, you try to normalize it. For instance, putting up a simplified version saying, if we talk about COVID, it's about a virus. And it's due to the lockdown of the government that my company has now troubles. So they're not reflecting on the way they are handling the lockdown, but they are putting the blame on the lockdown. That would be a kind of a normalization practice. And they try to legitimate what they're doing by making it socially, politically, and symbolically acceptable. We are a victim of COVID-19. So, but still, if we are a victim, we rely on experts because we are listening to the experts, and that is to control the environment. So it's difficult to navigate, and these are the normal reactions to this. If we look into organizational learning, the old theory of Argyris and Schoen is talking about simple loop learning and double loop learning. And simple loop is what everybody is doing when they are in a crisis. It's a simple process in which a mistake is detected and corrected, but without changing anything. So it's a very superficial type of learning process. The organization has learned something, but the process has not changed its self-understanding nor the reference frame inside which it is reflecting, acting, and communicating. So simple loop. Double loop, on the contrary, is defined as the more complicated process. You still detect a mistake and correct it, but the process itself leads you to rethink about the culture, about the values, about the goal of your company. And double loop learning is actually what we should get at, in my point of view, after COVID. Just to give you a short example, the biggest bank in Denmark, Danske Bank, had a crisis back in 2017, 2018 on a money laundering scandal, a huge one. And simple loop learning would be to go in and correct all the procedures so that no criminal can actually profit from the Danske Bank systems. But double loop learning would be actually to go in, looking into the mindset, to the culture of the people in the bank. And in 2020, Danske Bank actually went out saying, we are now renewing ourselves. And they communicated about it, that the HR person is now part of the executive leadership team. We are working on our culture and on our well-being of all of our employees. So this is an example actually of how to try to communicate about your double loop learning. So what can we do here with COVID? Well, for a start, normally within research, we say that there are 3 steps. Start by an evaluation. Evaluate your crisis management and communication process. What worked well? What didn't work? Did you have a plan? Did it work at all? Or did you have no plans at all? Evaluate the consequences, the impact of the crisis, economically, materially, manpower, symbolic consequences, and identify weaknesses and strengths. This is where to start. But next step is then how to turn the insights, the knowledge that you gain from this evaluation into double loop learning and opportunities. And here it's very important. The first learning I would say from COVID is no organization is immune to crisis. There's a lot of, well, we know from surveys that around 25% of companies do not have any kind of crisis planning. So maybe they should now try to ask themselves, why don't we plan anything? Why don't we prepare? Why don't we set up a system to face risks and crises? So you need to unlearn your old beliefs and values in order to be able to spot the new ones. So look at your crisis preparedness, risk and crisis management, the way of doing business, new business models perhaps, and look at your leadership and communication, thinking about the crisis. I think we have learned a lot here, and during this webinar, you are going to learn more. Then comes the third step, and third step is about follow-up and post-crisis communication. And looking into crisis communication theories, we have a theory about the discourse of renewal. Now it's time to communicate about how you want to renew yourself. And renewal is about putting in a fresh sense of purpose and direction that an organization or system discovers after it emerges from a crisis. And you need to communicate about it. So it's a matter of change, opportunities, and reputation. And actually, you could add legitimacy as well. But let me just show you 2 short examples before I start. The first one, only 3 days ago, the Dutch CEO of SAS went into an interview with one of the Danish newspapers, saying that SAS will never come back to the before COVID. We need to change in order to survive. We need to adapt to a new normal. We need to completely rethink our business. Whoa, that was an interview that made an impact. The day after, the stock prices, shoop, they really went down. And as you can see, dark clouds over SAS. SAS is fighting to survive. So that was really a specific kind of post-pandemic communication. We could also name it crisis communication or maybe strategic communication, because he's now at the point to have to negotiate with the unions about the returning of all of the staff, the pilots and so on at SAS. So quite an interesting example. But you also have companies who profited from the communication opportunities at the end of the crisis and during the crisis, actually communicating about citizenship. And I haven't seen that before. That is actually a new thing coming in during this crisis. This is just a small example to end my session from a Danish supermarket chain named Footix. The day of the reopening in Denmark, they went out with this advertisement in the newspapers. Today, your best way of shopping is to eat out. Go support restaurants and cafes in their reopening efforts. Skip your shopping with us today. That was quite a funny, but a little smart example of how to go in. So to learn, you need courage. There's a lot to learn from COVID, but also about communication opportunities. And you will learn more about this during the seminar. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Winnie. Very interesting. I'm also very excited that exactly in this session, we will have those different perspectives on how to learn from crisis. And we're very happy to have both the Norwegian and the Swedish perspective here. And we will see that organizations need to deal with this in a different way, depending where they're at. So I would invite Ulrike to start your presentation and tell us a little bit about how this has been going at DNV.
Thank you, Susanne. Thanks. Before turning on the presentation, just a few words on DNV, so it gives you a perspective on how we, had to handle the crisis. We are a quality assurance and risk management company of 12,000 people, headquartered in Norway, but we actually have offices in over 100 countries. And the crisis hit us in January last year in Wuhan, where we also have employees. So in terms of the crisis preparedness and crisis management, I feel quite confident that we, would be prepared for a next crisis. Of course, every crisis is of a different nature, so you never can use the same blueprint. But I think we managed to communicate internally and externally in a good way. But I was going to focus on actually what now, some practical examples, and Winnie shared some practical examples on the communication in her presentation. So let me share my screen now. Yes. So 3 areas I wanted to focus on. First of all, like many other companies as well, the way we have worked all virtually and still earned a lot of money actually in the company shows that people don't need to be in the office. So our future workplace model that is being implemented across the globe consists of 4 principles, with the main principle of flexible working, 3 days in the office and 2 days flexible. So either from home, or if people prefer to be in the office, they can be here, but that is a flexible way. So I think, that is a learning from the pandemic, and it'll be interesting to see how employees will embrace it. At the moment, I see there's a lot of colleagues around me in the office. So people are hungry to, go back and meet colleagues and have that coffee machine chat. The second one is I'll focus on is employee and customer communication and the interaction, so the hybrid model. So I'll show you an example on what it actually means in terms of how do we communicate. Will we fill meeting rooms again with customers? go to conferences, exhibitions, etc.? Will we have a hybrid model or run everything virtual? So I'll show you a couple of examples on that. And then another interesting part is, in my role, I'm not only responsible for communications, but also for public affairs and sustainability. So we are, having a nice way of combining communication and sustainability, and we're taking the opportunity of behavioral changes, such as, changed travel patterns and so on, to actually boost our sustainability targets. In terms of practical examples on communication, there is two. What happened last year when we were all grounded suddenly in March? Our CEO used to travel, 250 days a year, a lot he used to travel. And then we said, well, you can't wait until this crisis is over because we don't know, how long it's going to take. So we're going to put you on a virtual CEO global roadshow. And we've counted, and actually he has been on more than 50 trips, visiting over 60 countries since March last year. And what he said to us is, you know what, I'm never going to travel as much as before, which means that going forward, we need to also plan a kind of a hybrid. So some travels will take place in person, meaning the communication will take place directly with the customers and our employees, but others will stay virtually. He's actually had the luxury of being able to visit the Panama office, something that he would probably not have time to on a normal basis. So it's a real plus. So we see that COVID and the pandemic has helped us to actually, change our communication pattern, and in this case, the employee communication, so that he will have virtual roadshows still. We've got one country per week, in addition to some physical. The other one is that a lot of companies were probably used to the traditional town hall meeting. So, getting people into a big room, and then maybe if they were lucky to also have quite a dull live stream. So the people in the room had a different experience than the people on the live stream. We cut out all town hall meetings. It's not the typical town hall meeting anymore. But from a group CEO perspective, we have actually introduced, we had for the first year weekly videos to all employees. Now we have them bi-weekly. The frequency that the crisis has encouraged will stay. And I think instead of a quarterly town hall, to have this frequent communication with the employees is also nice, something that will stay. An example here in terms of how we run conferences and the customer communication. We have a big report, the Energy Transition Outlook, that is issued every September. We had a traditional communications approach to that, meaning that we would fill a room with 150 to 200 people. We would travel to London to meet some journalists, focus on all the traditional communication channels. Well, suddenly, everything had to be online, of course, as many conferences, and we managed to attract 11,600 people to the same event. And, that's where actually communication links into marketing, because this is an opportunity to turn this virtual communication into an incredible lead generation machine. So I think that, yes, we will probably also offer some physical, gatherings and webinar events again. But I think we see the opportunity in terms of increasing our reach by keeping some of the digital formats. And then moving on to the sustainability part. It's been, there's so many things that play into sustainability, and you see now the week ahead of COP26, how busy the communication channels are, and interesting to see how the governments also are all scrambling and suddenly, deciding on very ambitious cuts in terms of their CO2 footprint, or when they actually manage to go zero. So that, of course, helps, but also what we've learned over the past 2 years, we can't just return to the same patterns we've had. So for instance, reducing our carbon footprint by 50%, we'll have that ambition to start with. And then how do we do that? We'll go climate positive within 2025. And we will also switch to 100% renewable electricity, 100%. So all those ambitions on the left-hand side, they were set. And how can the behavioral change actually, help us to reach those goals? Well, on the right-hand side, the future working model, the 3+2 will lead to less office space need. So that means reducing the CO2 footprint for us. Reduction of business travels. In the current budgeting process I'm in with the company, we're very strict. We say that travel budgets for next year need to be cut with 50% from the 2019 baseline. And that will become even more, but 50%. So people will have to, really, select which meetings are important in person and which ones can easily be taken by Teams or Zoom, etc. And the final one, green car fleet. Well, I mean, we are, in a luxury position in Norway that we've had subsidies for many, many years. So that behavioral change has taken place here already. But we have launched a green car fleet policy across the globe where we're supporting our employees to, select electric cars where possible. Let me see. Those were the points. I think, Susanne, you can probably take down the presentation again. Those were the points from the practical perspective that I wanted to raise today.
All right. Thank you so much. Very interesting. And it's also exciting to hear, to see that actually this double loop learning that Benny just talked about, that you're really taking that to heart. So I think that will be an interesting point for the discussion. For a different perspective, I would ask or invite Victoria to start her presentation and share the slides, and also discuss a little bit with us like how things have been in Sweden and at the Volvo Group. So please go ahead when you're ready.
Yes, thank you, Susanne. And I'm, as you said, Victoria Häggblom, and I work within the Volvo Group, and I'm head of the our own communication or university, I would say, and also work in the People and Culture organization. And I would like to take you on a journey that we have been part of now for quite a long time, but also, of course, due to or thanks to the pandemic, have changed a little bit. But we are a huge company, as Ulrika's company as well. We are some plus 100,000 people around the globe, and we also have the opportunity and the challenges that we have 50% working in the offices and 50% of our employees are industrial workers in the shop floor. Now I'll try to just change slide. And just to not mix it up, we are the Volvo Groups. We are also the manufacturer of the trucks and buses and the construction equipment and also the solutions for marine and industrial applications. And as you probably know, that our business is in a huge transformation, not only linked to the pandemic. It's a huge transformation when it comes to products, going for electromobility and autonomous solutions. But of course, this also impacts our way of working and the services that we provide. And as a large and global employer, we are still, I will not say in the pandemic, but we are not out of it. So we are still considering where we really are in these questions. And exactly what Ulrika said, our system closed down, and I was myself working in Singapore last spring, and we're part of, I think we're in the second place when it comes to the spread of the COVID in the beginning of the year. And then I moved back to Sweden. But at the end of March, we closed down almost the whole industrial system worldwide. It was only the service market logistics providing spare parts to our customers that actually was up running. And now looking back or still discussing, we really see that this will impact our future work, and we are still preparing for, let's call it the new tomorrow. But it will also help us to speed up when it comes to transformation of digitalization, for instance, and we also see the need of higher flexibility. But there are a couple of things that stands out from external dialogue. We see that the offices might be an important element for the future workplace, but we also see the hybrid models combining the remote work and the office time that we think that will be here to stay. And we did a survey in the company mid-spring where some 15,000 employees were responding to it. And almost all employees say the same, that we see that we need a higher flexibility after the pandemic. We trust in the hybrid working environment with the combining of the virtual and the face-to-face interaction. But we also feel as employees or colleagues that we are a little bit more productive when working from home. So during this pandemic, beginning of this year, we actually launched a new people and culture strategy in the company with the direction of meeting the strategic objectives for the Volvo Group in 2030. And there are 3 areas that we have put as strategic directions. First of all is the multiple career over a lifetime, really forming our own journeys instead of having this predefined career path. And that builds a lot of curiosity and on constant growth. We talk about the boundaryless focus with a more end-to-end perspective, really try to avoid the silos and focusing much more on collaboration and networks, both internally and externally. And the last part is the maybe most important, to really make things easy and simple with guiding principles instead of extensive processes. We also set a couple of or 3 really people commitment. 2 of them are linked to engagement and recognition. And the third one is regarding the diverse perspective. We are quite low on the female perspective in the Volvo Group. I think today we are around 20, and we are really working out. We are not satisfied, of course, with 35%, but we need to put the direction, so to say. And of course, we would like to increase that as much as possible. But of course, these areas mentioned here also impact the communication a lot. And I will come back to that quite soon. I also wanted to share some enablers that we have defined during the pandemic and also put into our strategy. We talk about that we all need to be really truly connected. It starts with all of us, all people. And as I said, we are 50% office workers and 50% industrial workers, and that everyone really feels engaged in the work. We talk a lot about leading the way, not just the former leaders, that we all need to take lead in innovation and be part of the creative process, but also the empowerment in the work tasks that we are doing today. And a lot linked to the industrial environment, we really see that we move the leadership part into the industrial workers part. We also have a lot of focus, like you, Ulrike, on the sustainability. And as an industry, we are really focusing on safety and health and well-being, of course, but also the sustainable mindset. And we can also see of course, the decrease of travels and so on. And also when it comes to our way of producing our products, but also how our products will meet then the future demands in our business. And the last one, we talk a lot about in constant motion to really adapt. And I think also during this past 20 months, we have really learned what does that mean in reality. So what we have done, and I would say we are not post-pandemic when it comes to way of working and so on, but we have put together global principles that really will try to help out in the whole global environment, this plus 100,000 employees. But of course, we need to have a local touch and a unique business touch into it because it looks so different today when it comes to where we are during the pandemic and after, but also what we really would like to offer when it comes to current but also future employees. I will not go through this, but I will really show the 10 principles, and it starts, as I said, with the health, safety, and well-being. But it's also here we state that the offices are open, but it should really reflect the responsibility and businesses that we have today, meaning we don't have this 2+3 days or whatever. We are really now trying to understand what this means and how we can work in a more efficient way. But this will also be a part of course, the challenge that we have to attract talents in the future. So if I go in then to the communication part, we have spent some time now during the fall and looked into what will this make for us. And we have said that we have put 3 priorities. And now I talk about the people and culture communication team, which is part of the Volvo Group, but not the whole Volvo Group. But we will spend a lot of time to really make sure that we bring this strategy to life and really share and knowledge, best practices, but also recognize behaviors that really goes this way. The middle part, enable interaction. And we interact now in a complete different way than we did before the pandemic. Virtual, using all these new digital tools. We were struggling before, but now I think all of us understood the need of having good collaboration tools also from a virtual perspective. And actually in the survey that I mentioned before, we scored really high that people felt included thanks to these virtual tools, because we have today sometimes teams in Gothenburg, for instance, having it face-to-face and people calling in. Now everyone calling in to the meeting from their own computers, which feels that you are more included than before. And we will, of course, work much more regarding to attract new employees linked to this recommendation long-term target of 85%. I will end up with what we see as important business enablers from a communication perspective. As always, of course, our business acumen as communicators is key in order to really support the communication. But I think today also we will coach and have dialogue in other ways. We have mainly been coaching our leaders and done a lot of trainings. But I think we will take a next step and also coach all employees in communication in order to proceed and improve the communication. Digital mindset goes without saying. We will not be the expert of the tools as such, but really understand how we can use them in collaboration and so on. We also spend much more time today to understand the data insights, to really bring that in when we set the communication objectives, and working with the global reach and collaboration all over the globe in order to really make sure that we feel that we are one team. So yeah, together we have said that we really try to shape the world we want to live in. So that goes without saying, I think. So I stop there. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Victoria. Very interesting. It's also good to hear that the central themes coming back. So some of the learnings seem to be in like training leaders on the one hand for like bigger audience communication, partially online. These questions about what to do with hybrid teams. And our last speaker, joined by myself, we will discuss a little bit about leadership in the digital world, as well as the effects on digital teams. So we will talk about picking the cherries, and I will let Katrin start, and please let me know how to change the slides. I will do that for you.
Yes, thank you, Victoria and Ulrike and Vinny, for really interesting perspectives now post-pandemic. I'm going to talk together with Susanne a little bit about hybrid leadership communication. And there has been a lot of discussion and debate going on now post-pandemic. What does that mean? And how can we really pick the cherries of physical and virtual modes of leadership communication? I'm going to reflect a little bit about that in the beginning, and I invite the participants also to share in and join in the discussion after we have finished. So you can go to the next slide, Susanne. I have been doing a lot of research on communicative leadership. As we know, communicative leadership communication is really important in creating effective and healthy organizations, but also, as you were talking about, Victoria and Ulrike, create empowerment for employees to actually have a voice and being able to influence their own work environment, but also contribute to the overall goals of the company. So there is a lot of research, even before the pandemic, around communicative leadership, which really establishes the connections to employee empowerment, healthy workplaces, and communication maturity of organizations, where we can see that organizations that are more mature in working with their communication professionally also are more efficient in reaching their goals. And as you were talking about, Victoria, shaping the future together. Also the sustainable development perspective that creates enormous challenges for us all in both public organizations and private organizations today. Communicative leadership is characterized by some key facets: clarity and sense giving, feedback and responsiveness, and dialogue and sense making. And of course, before the pandemic, many organizations already were working in hybrid leadership communication modes. It has been a reality for a long time. For example, DNV and Volvo and a lot of other worldwide organizations, both public and private, of course, have made use of different digital technologies for creating communicative leadership. So communicative leadership is nothing that you only can do physically, of course. It depends on the different modes. But the pandemic has really accentuated this. And for many organizations have been thrown into only being able to use digital modes and online communication. And of course, having a dialogue is so much more difficult to do online than to do together in a small group in a room or when you talk directly to people. So how do we face this? Yes, thank you. There is also a lot of research on virtual leadership coming around. For example, one study that have been studying different modes of communication virtually and established that success factors is really to create communication on equal terms, although we are participating online, and also the online technology actually makes that possible for us. We were talking about preparing the seminar that we have experienced that perhaps the communication is on more equal terms now when all participate digitally from their own computers than before, when you had one group physically in a room and they had one or two on a link participating digitally, which is really hard to make a good contribution and participate on equal terms. So the digital modes are creating more equality in some ways. Another success factor is to enhance the digital listening, and the leaders actually try to be creative and inventive to use the digital channels also for listening, although as we do today, we are more relying on one-way communication, like TV broadcasts and presentations like this. And it is more difficult to create true interaction. I was actually doing another seminar this morning with a network of authorities in my region, in Sundsvall, where I am working and living. And we were trying to get the participants being more active and pose questions and so on. And it's so much more difficult to do that digitally. But this study actually found that those leaders that were active in the digital channels, they also made their teams more creative and innovative, and it actually led to higher performing organizations, but also a more creation of, do you say in English, sammanhållning, vi-känsla, sentiment of it's us together to do something, and they speak about this as higher emotional capital. You can go to the next, Susanne. So what I am very curious to discuss with you later is how do we create this hybrid leadership communication? Because research has not come there yet, as far as I know. But how can we pick these cherries of physical virtual modes of leadership communication? I think that both Victoria and Ulrike that are working in practice with this, you have a lot of solutions already where you're already doing this. I have created a model for spaces where you go from the digital to the physical, and you think about what can you do and how can you optimize your communication. You have some kind of formal communication, you have informal communication, and you can do some things digital. And in this hybrid environment, you can really decide, when do we really want to meet and what are we doing then? So what I was thinking about, as an example only, this is not research based, it's just my thinking, but to build relationships and be creative, that's one kind of informal physical meeting. A more formal physical meeting would be important decision making, when it's really important that you have different voices and all can have a say. Whereas in the digital channels, to be more formal, you could use those for informing, for distribution of work, coordinating, and so on. So I would love to hear your reflections on this slide, but now I'm leaving the word over to Susanna, who's going to talk more about teams.
All right, so thank you. If we look at teams and virtual teamwork, I think a lot has changed, and you can also hear that from the previous presentations. I think it's good to remember that one thing that used to be different before we have the pandemic is that virtual teams were often like self-chosen. It was a prepared transition in some companies. There was a lot of support on site. People would still meet in person. Well, what we have just gone through in the pandemic is a forced change to digitalization that doesn't fit everybody's mindset. Support might not have been in the best place. It was a rapid transition, and those teams were actually existing and used to different ways of working. And then part of this happened at home. So a lot, we changed a lot, and there will be a lot of change going forward again. So if we look a little bit more on the mindsets people can have, and I find it interesting that you also referred to that, Victoria, at the end. So research actually shows that people can have different mindsets about digitalization. And on the one hand, people can think it's a growth mindset. So this is something I'm excited about. I can learn new things. I can learn how to work with those new tools. While other people have more of a fixed mindset, feeling that they are at the maximum of their learning. They don't want to learn this digitalization. And for those people, actually, the news that we will go through yet a new normal might actually be kind of daunting. And the same for perceptions of mindset in the organization. So a study throughout the pandemic done in Germany with 600 people shows that self-evaluation, so how well am I capable to deal with this digitalization, actually predicts how well people adapt. And this will also be the same like going forward. So how well do I feel adapted right now, and how does that feel for me when continuing? So In developing teams, the old research actually shows that teams go through different stages when they start working together. They start in a forming stage, then there's a storming stage where people try to set norms, a norming stage, and then teams perform. And we actually see that every time there is a large shift, we take a step back and we actually have to start over. So if we have to set new norms every time we shift throughout the systems. And in that, leadership actually take into account that there's different ways of supporting their team. So one of my own research studies, where you see the graph in the middle, is that leaders can actually help the teams communicate better by giving them autonomy, either by encouraging them to coordinate a lot and to allowing them to work highly autonomously, or if the teams are more interdependent, by helping this coordination. So we're going quickly through the time, and we will end with 5 tips for this part. That is, you can start today, practice communicative leadership, check employee preferences for hybrid solutions. So where do people want to work? Promote awareness of people's mindsets, try to talk about this, find the optimal level of autonomy, and then finally match the mode of communication with the goal. So sometimes it might be that town hall meeting, sometimes it might be a digital meeting. We will see how that goes forward. All right, so at that, I would invite everybody online to ask questions, and I would invite Ulrike for like a first comment, because you might also have to rush off to another meeting. So we're very happy that you found the time. And I would ask you for a first comment while our audience can fit in more questions.
Thank you, Susanne, and thank you to everybody. I think this has been a great, sharing of both academia and practical examples. A comment is I liked Kathrin's proposal on the chart, kind of where you can maybe see, physical or digital meetings, kind of where do we fit. I think the challenge will be actually the ones in the middle, and it'll be a trial and error. So, because I think we know that actually a workshop or a contract negotiation, something like that, are good to actually have that, you get that feeling of what the person across from you thinks, which is a little bit easier than maybe on screen. But the one is the one top left corner, I think you said the delegation. But it's actually that combination where, yes, you delegate, but you want to also do some brainstorming, that the type of, team meetings that you have, or there's a lot of projects where, you have a combination of delegating, but you also need to take some decisions and so on. So I think the next year will be a real piloting for us and finding out. And I also liked the proposal to actually ask the employees, get some feedback on what their preferences are. But I think also some will probably have to be forced to certain formats, because I think some find the working from home very cozy for absolutely everything, and that kind of maybe doesn't fit in the team culture that we have in a lot of companies.
All right, thank you, Kathrin.
Thank you, Ulrike. Yes, of course, all models are simplifications of the reality, and it will be really interesting to follow your try out in this, creating a system that works for you, and think about the goals of the communication events and so on. Yeah.
All right. There's a question from the audience to Victoria. Can you say something about how you measured engagement?
Yes, we have a yearly pulse, actually, where we have that as one of the questions. But unfortunately, we just made the pulse, so I can't refer to where we are today, because we have not gotten the full result yet. But we do it on a yearly base for the whole group, and then we of course have action plans for all teams to work on this. So that's how we follow up and measure it.
But what will be the dimensions that you measure for engagement? I'm curious about that too. So when you put up questions in the poll, what do you ask? Are you engaged? Of course I am.
Yeah, but if you feel that you're involved in the decisions around your team, that you feel included, and also linked also to continuous improvement and these kind of questions. So, but I can provide afterwards exactly the question as such. But there are various, and it's both from a team perspective, narrow down where you belong, but also from another perspective for the Volvo Group. Yeah.
All right. Very interesting. Different question asking about whether the differences in the role the employees have in the organization, so for example, managerial or executive, do we think that affects the employees' willingness to adapt and learn from changes? And I think I'll just open it up, but maybe Vinnie?
Yes. Well, I do think that there are differences, but actually people are different, and some people are more innovation minded than others, and some are more open for change. But if you are a leader or a manager, at least a lot of managers see themselves as needing to do changes because they feel that they are expected to do something because of the role that they're actually having. But again, some of the changes that they're making are not that big. Others are really big. So sometimes they see themselves as having to be front runner. But I think it's quite interesting because I read an article in one of the Danish newspapers 2 days ago about the difference between an employee 38 years old and an employee 68 years old. Because in our mindset, we have this idea that senior people forget about changes, they are resistant, etc., etc. But it could also be the reverse, that you actually find a person at 30 years old not willing to change. So if you had to get rid of one of these two people, which one to choose actually? So that was quite interesting to learn about, because I think people are different. So it is a matter of the atmosphere, of the culture, but also of course of how you see yourself and the expectations you feel you have in that function. Yeah.
And that's great, Vinnie. I just wanted to add also that, of course, individual changes, and we are different, but also possible to work to create a culture around values on the attitude towards change. So there could be whole units or groups and teams also that are resistant to change or that have a really innovative culture. So it is possible to change, but we always have the challenges of different individuals and how we react.
And I can agree on that. And what I said in the beginning, that we are in a huge transformation when it comes to our industry, and it started before pandemic, and we need to understand what that will mean for us, both product-wise, but also the processes and such. So we work a lot with the competence shift right now. And of course, it's a huge change when you also get into, is still my competence valid tomorrow? And where will I be? But I also think we gain a lot with our culture of continuous improvement. It helps us a lot to really think change. But I fully agree what you say, Katrine. It's so individually. But I think we really try to work with the whole organization to understand where we are leading, and that's why we have been so transparent with our strategic directions, both internally but also externally, where we are heading, in order to understand the full picture and see where I fit in.
Yeah, so it's kind of a combination, and for in the one hand, organizational culture, like how do people feel like it's not so easy to be the only person that wants to change or the only person that doesn't want to change, and support to some extent. So it might also be the combination of like managers and the employees together. There's a question directly for Winnie. What media was it changing mindset and age?
It was a communication advisor actually who wrote about this, and it was in Jyllands-Posten in Denmark. By the way, Suzanne, there was another question very previous about the double loop learning. I don't know if I can add to that one too, because that's also about changes in learning.
Yeah, can you repeat the question for us?
Yeah, the question was, is double loop learning only a matter of changing the organizational culture? And I would say no, definitely not. I gave the example with Danske Bank, but actually it could be about supply chain, it could be about your business model, it could be about relations to the market, etc. For instance, if you are within the fast fashion industry, like H&M, right now they have to rethink their whole business model. What does it mean to be into fast fashion, and then think about sustainability? So, I mean, sometimes it's digging deeper into your values and beliefs. So, and another example was a bestseller in Denmark who had problems with cancer-provoking colors in their clothes. Should they just change and control the clothes, or should they start thinking about the supply chain? They had 6,000 people producing colors and clothes for them. Maybe they should put up a completely whole new system. So this is going deeper than just repairing the product recall or whatever it may be. But to come back to the differences in people, I love the book by Erik Abrahamsen about change with no pain. In there, he's talking about a lot of leaders being change alcoholics. I like that expression. Okay, I'll stop here.
All right. I also wonder, and a question for you, Victoria, whether you have like a different approach, because it must be so different for the people who have been in the office or working hybrid, and the people for whom that simply because of their job was not possible, right? Because their work is physical.
Can you repeat what you say? The difference?
Can you elaborate a bit on like maybe different approaches for people in different work settings? So the physical approach versus digital approach.
Yeah, but of course, and as I said, we stopped down almost the whole industrial system for some weeks, and it differs area by area and also countries. But for sure, we brought back the whole factories and so on quite soon, and here we needed present by the closest support functions, but the rest were asked actually to not be in office in order to keep the level of or the amount of people down there. And of course, we have utilized so many different communication tools in order both before entering back to the plant and keep everyone updated. And of course, we didn't have the channels inside ourselves to communicate privately with our industrial workers, even though we are working quite heavily to have this bring your own device setup and so on. So it has been a challenging part, but always the closest leadership have always been on site supporting them. But from the office perspective, I think we already started the journey before with the digital tools, but it have increased so much the maturity during the pandemic.
All right, thank you. So we're almost through the time. I would like to very warmly thank the panel for all their inputs today. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to the audience as well. We hope you enjoyed this session. Is there anybody in the panel who wants to make like a last comment or raise a last point?
No, I can just say that it will be really, really interesting to follow the development from now on and to see how we can engage and really develop this hybrid communication modes in different kinds of organizations. And it will be so interesting for me as a researcher to follow this development. And thank you all for sharing your perspectives.
Yeah, I fully agree. All right. Thank you so much. I think with that, we will end this webinar. The recording will be available, and we would ask or invite all of the audience to also follow along on the NORA website for upcoming events. We will have a next webinar in December. And of course, you please feel free to contact any of us for further questions. All right. Thank you for today.